This is the biggest snowstorm in your state's history. Unsurprisingly, in 51st place, we have Florida. On March 6, 1954, up to 4 inches of snow fell in the Florida Panhandle. In 50th place, again unsurprisingly, we have Hawaii. In early February 1936, Haleakala National Park saw 15.5 inches of snow. Next up is Louisiana. The infamous Gulf Coast blizzard of Valentine's Day 1895 brought well over a foot of snow to much of southwestern Louisiana. Next up is Mississippi, where up to 18 inches of snow fell near the Tennessee border in late December back in '63. This storm was actually overshadowed by another one a week later on New Year's Eve, where up to 15 inches of snow fell in eastern Mississippi. Next up is Georgia. Up to 21 inches of snow fell during the superstorm of 1993, which is considered to be the most severe snowstorm of all time. This is not the only time we'll see 1993 on this list. Next up is Alabama. In January 1940, northern Alabama saw as much as 22 inches of snow. After the storm departed, temperatures fell to as low as -16. Next up is Arkansas. In January 1918, 25 inches of snow fell near the Missouri border. Up until February 2021, this was the snowiest month in Little Rock's history. Next up might be a surprise, it's Illinois. The blizzard of January 1979 dropped up to 26 inches of snow in the Chicago suburbs. Next up is Illinois' neighbor to the west, Missouri. Over 27 inches of snow fell in March of 1970. Next up is Washington, D.C. 28 inches of snow fell in late January 1922. This was dubbed the Knickerbocker Storm because so much heavy wet snow fell that it caused the roof of the Knickerbocker Theater to collapse in the middle of a show. Next up is South Carolina. In February 1969, 29 inches of snow fell in the Piedmont region. Next up is Iowa. In March 1909, 29 inches of snow fell to the northwest of Des Moines. Next up is Delaware. In early February 2010, the entire state of Delaware saw over 2 feet of snow in what was later called Snowmageddon. Another big storm arrived on the 9th and 10th of February, and some areas saw up to 4 feet over the course of the week. Next up is Texas. In early February 1956, parts of the Texas Panhandle saw up to 30 inches of snow. Nearby Vega reported a snow depth of 61 inches, but that was never verified. Next up is New Jersey. Despite averaging the least amount of snow in the state each year, Cape May holds the record for heaviest snowstorm in New Jersey with 34 inches in February 1899. Next up is Oklahoma. The infamous blizzard of 1971 dropped up to 3 feet of snow in the northwestern part of the state. Next up is Kansas. In the blizzard of March 1912, Olathe saw an astounding 38 inches of snow. And next up is Rhode Island. The blizzard of 1978 is widely considered to be the king of all New England snowstorms. This storm was as strong as a Category 2 hurricane. Woonsocket saw 38 inches of snow with drifts of up to 15 feet. Coming in at number 33 is North Dakota. This is the most recent addition to the list, occurring in April 2022. 40 inches of snow fell to the northwest of Minot. And there wasn't much rest for the weary either, as the following winter, 2022-23, ended up being the second snowiest ever in North Dakota. Next up is Maryland. This is our first repeat, coming from the March 1993 storm of the century. Parts of 20 states saw at least 10 inches of snow, with western Maryland maxing out at 40 inches. Next up is Kentucky. The winter of 1997-98 was one of the warmest and wettest on record thanks to a super El Nino. In early February 1998, Berea College saw an astounding 40 inches from the storm, while Louisville also set its all-time record. Next, we have Kentucky's neighbor to the north, Indiana. In early January 2018, in the middle of an Arctic plunge, a narrow lake effect snowband set up over northwest Indiana and dropped up to 41 inches of snow. Next up is Wisconsin. Some would say the blizzard of March 1881 should be at the top of this list, but that was before records were officially kept. The state record was set 18 years later in March 1899 in Washburn County, which saw 42 inches. This is the second time a storm from 1899 has made the list. Tied with Wisconsin, we have Ohio. Dubbed the Great Snowstorm of 1901, this actually came as a surprise. The storm was initially expected to move eastward into Georgia, but instead it made a sharp turn to the north. As a result, snow ripped for 3 straight days, and the northeastern part of the state saw up to 42 inches. Next up is Nebraska. A late season blizzard in 1927 brought over 43 inches of snow to the northwestern part of the state. Next up is Massachusetts. This is the second time the legendary blizzard of 78 has made it on this list. The north shore of Mass was hit the hardest, with Ipswich maxing out at just under 44 inches. Drifts were as high as 15 feet, and thousands of cars were stranded on Massachusetts highways during this storm. Next up, we have Minnesota. January 1994 is best known for being the coldest month in modern U.S. history, but a storm at the beginning of the month dropped over 46 inches in the northeastern corner of the state. Next up, we have Vermont. In early February 1995, a powerful nor'easter brought 4 feet of snow to Jay Peak. Next up, we have Virginia. If the March 1993 superstorm is considered to be the GOAT, then the blizzard of 96 would be right on its heels. 49 inches of snow fell in Shenandoah National Park. Next, we have Virginia's neighbor to the south, North Carolina. This is our third entry from the 1993 superstorm. Mount Mitchell, the highest point east of the Mississippi, saw 50 inches of snow from this storm. Next up, we have Connecticut. The fabled blizzard of 1888 brought snow snowdrifts of up to 50 feet in the New York City metro. Middletown, which sits in between Hartford and New Haven, recorded 50 inches from the storm. Rounding out the top 20, we have Pennsylvania. Joining its rival across the river, Pennsylvania's biggest snowstorm also came during the February 1899 blizzard with 52 inches of snow falling in Coatesville. Next up is Maine. The second major blizzard of February 1969 became known as the 100-hour storm due to its impressive duration. Much of eastern New England saw over 30 inches of snow from this, as indicated by the red, with Maine maxing out at 57 inches. We'll see the storm again later on in the rankings. Next up, we have West Virginia. The Great Appalachian Storm of 1950 took a very unusual track. Rather than continuing up the east coast like most nor'easters, instead it retrograded back to the west. As a result, the mountains of West Virginia saw up to 57 inches of snow. It may be a surprise to see this one so high up in the ranks, but next up is Tennessee. Once again, we have the 1993 superstorm, which dropped 5 feet of snow at Mount LeConte. And next we have Michigan. A lake effect snowstorm for the ages occurred between Christmas and New Year's 2001. The town of Petoskey, which sits on the shore of Lake Michigan, saw 7 feet of snow over the course of the week. In 15th place, we have Wyoming. This storm in late March 2007 is actually remembered more for a tornado outbreak over the plains, but northern Wyoming saw up to 5 feet of snow. Next up is Montana. In late April 1984, an epic blizzard descended upon the Rockies, with Red Lodge seeing over 6 feet of snow. Next up, we have New Mexico. The winter of 1915-1916 is considered to be one of the most severe on record in the West. In late January, Chama saw over 6 feet of snow, and then a few days later, in a separate storm, Seattle saw its biggest storm on record. Next up is South Dakota. The blizzard of February 1998 was known for its impressive duration, among other things, sticking around for 5 days. Given persistent blizzard conditions and wind chill values as low as -50, roads were impassable for several days. The jackpot zone was in the Black Hills region, where up to 74 inches fell over a 3-day period and 114 inches fell during the duration of the storm. Next up is Utah. In early December 1982, a blizzard with hurricane-force winds dumped nearly 80 inches of snow in the Salt Lake City area. Another blizzard hit the Rockies a few weeks later on Christmas Eve, heavily impacting Salt Lake City again, as well as Denver. Rounding out the top 10, we have Nevada. At the tail end of one of the wettest winters on record, the Sierra Nevada mountains were hit with an epic blizzard on Easter weekend. Construction was already underway for the 1960 Winter Olympics in Lake Tahoe, but that had to be put on hold. In 9th place, we have Oregon. In April 2009, a powerful storm in the Pacific Northwest dumped over 7 feet of snow in the eastern part of the state. In December of that same winter, Portland saw one of its largest and most destructive snowstorms on record. In 8th place, we have New York. In November 2014, an early season cold spell allowed the lake effect snow machine to rip, dumping heavy snow for 2 consecutive days over western New York. Areas just south of Buffalo saw up to 8 feet of snow, while areas to the north didn't really see much of anything. In 7th place, we have Washington. In January 1971, over a 3-day period, parts of Mount Rainier saw as much as 88 inches of snow. Over the next 12 months, Mount Rainier would set a world record for most amount of snow in a 12-month period, totaling 92 feet. In 6th place, we have New Hampshire, the highest rank east of the Continental Divide. The 100-hour storm of February 1969 has returned to the list. America's windiest location and highest point in New England saw 91 inches over a 3-day period and 98 inches over the entire storm. Coming in at number 5, we have Arizona. In January 2010, a cyclone with the intensity of a Category 2 hurricane arrived on the west coast. When all was said and done, Flagstaff recorded around 8 feet of snow. Number 4 is Idaho. In 1969, an early season snowfall delivered over 8 feet of snow to Mountain Home Air Force Base. A few days later, the same storm dropped 16 inches of snow in Denver. And speaking of Denver, number 3 is Colorado. In January 1956, Wolf Creek Pass saw over 100 inches of snow in 3 days. In 2nd place, we have California. In February 1959, a powerful atmospheric river descended upon California for a week straight. Mount Shasta recorded 188 inches of snow over the course of the week, including 135 inches in a 3-day period. And finally, at number 1, we have Alaska. In late December 1955, Thompson Pass, Alaska recorded 147 inches over a 3-day period. To put things into perspective, that's taller than 2 Trae Youngs. If you enjoyed the series, please let me know in the comments what you would like to see next.